4, 3, 2, 1. This is Deducter bringing you set 1 of Woongjin Stars versus KT Rolster play on the 2nd of July. And today we have Stats versus Light. Interesting to note that both teams bring out a star player here. Light is the purple Terran at the 11 o'clock position, whereas the teal Protoss at the 1 o'clock position is Stats. Although I probably should have used parallelism there, I did not, which is not good. And Stats there, taking a leaf out of Flash's page. I know it's leaf out of book or page out of book, but Stats there adjusting his monitor, not quite going as insane as Flash. Of course, what with his crazy ruler and taking his hands off the keyboard and all that stuff. Light, on the other hand, seems to be concentrating hard. He looks quite older, quite a bit older now for some reason. I don't know. Regardless, oh wait, no, that was Stats. What am I talking about? That was obviously Stats, and I do not know what that is saying, but it sounds extremely amusing. At least the Korean commentators think so. So I will laugh a bit too. And there we see a white couple. Now that's actually quite a bit more rare. So good job by the camera people show us that, I guess. Usually you see Korean couples or individual white guys seem to be fairly common. Anyway, Light, notoriously weak against Protoss, the Stats solid in all his matchups. The one thing I think in this series is that, so lately, everybody I'm sure is aware of Flash's hand injury. From what I've heard, supposedly the KT coach basically will not be sending out Flash into Pro Lane for the remainder of the season. Or if Flash makes an appearance, it will be the rare appearance. And I think, deservedly so, Flash has done plenty, more than enough to cement his fame. And I do not wish to see his hand injury ruining his chances of performing well in future, like StarCraft maybe a year from now, or a few months from now even. It'd be a shame if he's forced to retire. Because his hand is just too injured here. Looks like Gateway into core build and then probably expansion here coming from Stats, whereas Light has gone for the racks. He's also set up to blockade his base. This is Beltway, which is considered a heavily Terran favored map, but who knows how this will go. This time, this is Beltway 2.0. The original Beltway had the elevated 4 expansions that were mineral only in the middle, but now they're on the flat ground just with walls separating them, which is still a very strong defensive position for Terran, but nowhere near as insane as it used to be. In fact, Protoss, if they use carriers well, or perhaps if they use Dragoons, they can snipe away at those SCVs fairly well, and the Terran player actually has some trouble dealing with it if they are not prepared. It's actually going down here for Light. So let's see what Stats opts to do on this map. But as I was saying, yes, Flash very well may not play in this series. Still, there is plenty of talent, certainly on Woongjin Stars, to give us some great matches. You still have Free, who is, well, Free's not doing so well anymore, but Zero hopefully has recovered somewhat from his crushing OSL loss to Flash, and Zero did not even play a particularly inspired series, I have to say. Zero really played too standard, I feel, against the likes of Flash. He is known for his creativity, but opting not to exhibit it, and that just does not work against a player of Flash's caliber. Looks like there is no gas being mined here for Stats, so he is putting down his expansion, then likely resuming mining fairly quickly. Dragoon is out as with a Zealot. Interesting to note that Stats has not scouted with his probe, so he's relying on that Zealot to scout. Now the Dragoon is going to find out where Light is, and the Marine withdrawing behind the blockade there. A tank should hopefully be out soon to deal with this Dragoon. Nexus going down, Light sees that. Light also putting down his command center inside his base. He is going to be forced to pull some SCVs off the line to repair the supply depot. The SCV will also get picked away by the Dragoon. You can see Stats there reacting very quickly. He started firing at SCV long before he got to supply depot, and really, Light needs to repair that supply depot sooner rather than later. It would be an absolute disaster if that got broken down. Even though he sort of sees that Stats can't have any units in time to deal with it. As you can see, both players microing very well. Light withdrawing his SCV at just the correct moment with only 10 health left. The tank coming out to stop this Dragoon. It'll be forced to retreat. The tank giving chase here with the barracks being lifted off. Zealot doing something in the background. Oh, it's killing the tempo. So both players microing well thus far. Obviously that is Stats. I don't know why for a second there I thought he was Light earlier. that's why he looks so much older and weird. Obviously, mind freeze there. Anyway, I think that is probably Siege Mode that is researching for Light. Light is not lifting his command center down to his natural just yet. He built SCV from there. He seems to be a bit concerned about these Dragoons that is coming out. The Siege Mode is finished. That tank is actually a bit exposed. If Light is feeling particularly risky, or feels like taking rolling his dice, taking some risk here, he may choose to use his Dragoons to attack from the low ground against that tank. But it looks like Light is going to back off here. It's not clear whether it would basically depend on luck whether he will kill that tank. So the rewards are almost certainly not worth it, considering Light can build additional mech forces to stop him. Whereas these Dragoons can be quite useful if Light decides to put down a few more factories and go for a push fairly quickly. Stats will be able to micro his Dragoons well enough to stop it. So many Terran tank pushes have been stopped by the likes of Stork, for instance, controlling just 6 or 7 Dragoons and strategically sniping the tanks with perfect micro. So Terran pushes early on often not working out against truly formidable Protoss player, although the lesser Protoss players, the ones who screw up their Dragoon micro, can be in deep trouble. Both players carrying out the tempo, overlooking the tempo connected to the ledge, overlooking their naturals to prevent some sort of drop in the back from crippling them. Terrans, of course, with tanks. There are 2 tanks there. And no way for the Protoss to get units to the ledge. They would be in serious, serious trouble. Tanks kill probes in 1 hit because shields take full damage. Second command center going down already, or third command center rather, going down already for Light. So Light being very aggressive with his expansion build. Stats is also getting ready to set up his third base here. There is a single Marine that will scout this out. Stats needs to bring his Dragoons in to finish off that Marine, which he does. A few Vultures coming. They might hope to snipe the probe. No, it looks like they will be laying some mines possibly between the natural of Stats base and this 3 o'clock base, and then maybe trying to sneak around into the natural. No, they are just laid 2 mines and withdrew. So Light being very aggressive with his expansions. There is an observer there for Stats. He should be able to spot this. It seems like Terran these days are responding to this basic 3 base standard opening from Protoss by getting their expansion earlier. Terran is a very defensive race. They probably will be able to hold on to that third base without too much of an issue from the Protoss player getting these expansions. I don't think the Protoss player will be able to mass up enough forces, but at the same time, Stats has not put down his Nexus yet. I'm not quite sure what Stats is trying to do here. These Vultures are going to surround 3 Dragoons and try to kill them. 2 of the Dragoons go down. A third one is going to take serious damage from mines. All 3 Dragoons getting killed by the Vultures, so nice little victory there by Light. He lost a few Vultures, but he inflicted good damage. So well done with those Vultures, I have to say. I believe the Cybernetics Core is still spinning at this point. Obviously not for Dragoon range, but it's got to be for Carriers +1 attack upgrade. So Carriers quite common, and what's even more obvious is of course the Fleet Beacon, which I had missed before now. Carriers are quite strong in this map due to how the walls in the middle work over those the walls protecting the 4 mineral-only expansions. Stats has opted to go for Carriers very quickly before he even put down his third Nexus. So, in fact, Light will be quite a bit economically ahead. I'm not sure whether this is a good move, not necessarily going for Carriers, which do seem to work out fairly well on this map, but getting the third base so late, Carriers are extremely expensive, and Light will be able to start massing Goliaths soon enough to deal with the Carriers. Light's already got a decent force of Vultures and tanks. Shuttle's out for some Zealot bombs, hopefully. No Goliaths to deal with this Shuttle. And there are plenty of mines protecting these tanks, 2 of which have sieged. The rest have not sieged because they are quite paranoid of a Zealot bomb here. And that Shuttle is just maneuvering around, trying to scare Light a bit, I guess. Interestingly enough, the Shuttle did manage to draw off most of Light's forces, but Stats doesn't have anything to actually break through that minefield to kill those 2 tanks there. Now Goliaths are out, the Shuttle will be forced to withdraw along with most of these Dragoons. So this will come down to carrier versus Goliath combat, most likely. Goliaths are extraordinarily good against carriers. Even if there are something like 6 carriers, as long as you can mass up enough Goliaths, you can just kill the interceptors and wear them out. But Goliaths are really bad against a combination of air and ground units. So the goal of the Protoss player is often to use the carriers to kill tanks, and then unleash their ground army on the remainder of the Terran forces in conjunction with the carriers is very difficult to stop. Looks like a dropship and carriers coming into the main base of Light here. Light needs to withdraw his forces to deal with this. There are almost no interceptors in those carriers, a puny number. Goliaths are coming up to deal with this. There are only 4 Zealots there, and this little foray by Stats, I don't see what the purpose was. Maybe just to distract Light and keep his forces in his base. That's the only possible explanation for that maneuver, because it did beyond pathetic damage. Well, I guess if it did beyond pathetic damage, it would be more than pathetic, so he did below pathetic damage. That would be the accurate way of describing it. Regardless, Stats not doing much of anything to Light thus far in this game. +1 air attack is at least finished there for Stats. He's got 2 carriers with, looks like almost max interceptor, but Light, with the 3rd base up earlier, has plenty of forces. He's going to start moving out. He wants to nip this in the bud and defeat Stats before Stats can mass up a critical number of carriers. Stats only with 3 carriers. Looks like he didn't even have the resources to build 2 carriers simultaneously after his first 2. Now, Stats is going to unleash his carriers on these tanks, it looks like, but there are so many Goliaths they're going to kill the interceptors without a problem. And Stats does not seem to have much of a ground army at all. 4 carriers are out, but 2 of which have pretty much no interceptors. Stats has no choice but to use his carriers regardless. The fewer interceptors there are, the more vulnerable they are to this sort of attack, a hold position attack by the Goliath. Stats using a 2nd Forces Dragoons to try to counterattack, but Light's not going to be distracted by that. Light doesn't care. I think he can clean that up with reinforcements. His main force is streaming, is positioned itself over the natural, just right outside the natural of Stats, and Stats does not seem to have anything to deal with this. Slow Zealots getting pummeled by tank fire there, and his Dragoons not doing too well either. Stats has counterattacked again, and that shuttle suiciding into the turrets. Oh, Stats could have surely used those shuttles to try to deal with the tanks, or at least, use the shuttles, use the carriers to clear out the turrets before attacking with his shuttle. As it stands, Stats has lost control over his natural, and he will lose the base at the 3 o'clock, it looks like. Light has sent all his forces down there, it seems, to deal with that. Plenty more Goliaths are coming out of Light's base, and Light has saved his base at 9 o'clock. This is surely a GG from Stats. I just think Stats doesn't even have speed lots yet. Absolutely pathetic. Zealots against these tanks. Without speed, they can do absolutely nothing. This expansion at the 3 o'clock is going down, and Light is going to take a very, very comfortable win. Stats, for some odd reason, not opting to get the 3rd base first, and with a rather pathetic ground army, just incapable of meeting Light head-on. So I blame this mostly on Stats' poor play, although Light certainly played very well this game. Again, very dangerous for the Protoss to go for 2 bases, then carriers, before, it's usually safer to go for 3 bases, possibly even more than that, even on this map where carriers are fairly favored, before really committing to carriers. Otherwise, they just will not have the economic base to support their fleet. And now, Light looks fairly confident at victory there. These Goliaths don't even care about targeting down the carriers. They're just fighting the interceptors. Okay, now they're targeting the carriers. They might pick off 1. No, that carrier barely just survives. Even if Light loses all these Goliaths, I don't think he's going to care. He can rebuild his forces. Whereas Stats is almost mined out. Light would be somewhat wise to consolidate his Goliath forces, though. He's lost quite a few Goliaths thus far, and actually Stats has built up a reasonably powerful force of carriers here. But Light, with his tanks, are going to march into Stats' base. I'm not sure what Stats will have there to stop there. He's got 1 new carrier and 3 Zealots. Not going to accomplish anything. At least those Zealots have speed now. Light is forcing Stats to withdraw his carriers. back to save his base. Not that he has any chance of doing so, and this maneuver has bought Light enough time to rebuild his Goliath fleet to destroy the remaining carriers. In fact, Stats, he probably should have realized that there was no chance for him to save his base. If he had gone on an attack, there may yet be a chance he could win. Actually, Stats' army, Air Force, does not look nearly as bad, is not in nearly as bad of a shape as I thought. This game might yet be closer than I imagined. Rarely does Refugee Protoss actually work. It's not quite Refugee Protoss yet because there is a bit of mining going on in his main, but now so many Goliaths are out for Light. Those carriers, I don't think Light should try to kill the carriers. I think as long as he is careful and he picks off the interceptors with good micro, although what he needs to do is sort of move and then attack, not withdraw the entire way. That's just going to incur more casualties than he wants to suffer by putting down turrets to try to delay these carriers as much as possible. Really, I mean, Stats has invested every remaining mineral he has into these carriers, and if he can somehow get done with these carriers, he will actually win the game. A rare example of Refugee Protoss actually prevailing over the Terran player. But Light here, his Goliaths are sort of trapped outside his natural, allowing them to be picked off single file. Things not quite working out as well for Light as I thought they would be. Light actually in a bit of trouble here. These carriers still have a good number of interceptors left, it seems. So who knows how this game may yet turn out. It is coming down to the absolute wire. If Light's forces weren't so stuck in his natural, I think this game would be over already. As it stands, Light is actually not in such a good position. He's got enough lives, it seems, to perhaps ward Stats outside of base. The Stats still has interceptors. He's funneling all the resources he has into his carriers, one of which only has 4 interceptors. Most of them don't even have the full complement. The thing is, Light is continuing to produce Goliaths at this point, whereas the production capabilities of Stats is dwindling. Some of these carriers only have 1 interceptor left, one of which has 0. So the interceptor count is slowly getting whittled down for Light. Light has 3 mining bases now, it looks like, and as long as he can somehow hold his ground here near his factories, he should be able to prevail at the end of the day. I'm not sure whether Stats will be able to kill the Goliaths faster than they can pop out, and now the interceptor count is starting to look somewhat thin here. One factor that has aided Stats a bit is that Light does not have the full mech upgrades. He in fact only has 1-1, which is not nearly as devastating as the interceptor. 2-1 is really when the Goliaths start to annihilate the interceptors, but now Stats microing out of his mind here. He only has maybe 20 or perhaps 25 interceptors left against half a dozen or so Goliaths of Light, but Light is just going to buy time and continue to build up his Goliath force. He is producing, of course. He's also got some turrets that he can utilize, and these carriers, absolutely heroic effort by them. I guess Stats with absolutely nothing better to do now except micro his carriers is microing out of his mind here, preserving some carriers with just a bare minimum amount of health left. But ultimately, one of the carriers goes down. Attrition is starting to take its toll, and I really just don't think Light can come back at this point. Good effort at the end, and making this game closer than it appeared, but Light, after he lost those 2 bases, just not able to compete economically, and now Stats suiciding his carriers into Light's turrets and Goliaths. He's going to go out with a blaze of glory. GG coming from Stats, going on to set 2.
네, 진짜 그 타이밍 좋게 말씀하신 두 캐리어 있을 때 탁 치니까 그 순토에 끊겼어요, 사실상.
네, 상대방이 가장 취약할 때 그 타이밍을 정확하게 노렸습니다. 캐리어 2개일 때 급하게 가는 것이 아니라 딱 4개 나왔지만 그 2개가 빈깡통일 때 정말 짐이 될 때 노리는 이재호 선수의 타이밍. 이제는 정말 프로토스를 만나도 약한 그런 이재호 선수가 아닙니다. 네, 잘하네요.
특히 이렇게 화나게 웃을 수 있는 게 김대엽이 진짜 웃기를 자주